Welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. Glad you're able to spend a few minutes with us today. A clear, cold start to the day, but the sun is out. The clouds are behind us, at least a majority of them. I'm seeing a few in the sky, but not many. And looks like all of the snow that we had to deal with yesterday has stopped falling. And looking at the forecast moving ahead, it looks like we may not have to see it for much longer. The reason why, we're looking at a warm-up that's going to begin, but not until later tonight. It's going to be cold for most of the day today. But as the evening hours drag on, we're going to see a warm-up overnight, and tomorrow we're looking at a high of 6 degrees. Thursday looking at a high of 3, but then Friday, get this, folks, 12 in December. I'll take it. We'll keep our eye on the forecast. Of course, Alistair will be here on Friday to run down your weekend for you. We have a busy show planned for you today, so we're going to jump right into it. You may have heard on the sports this morning that there's a pretty significant event coming to Halifax and coming to Scotiabank Centre, and that's going to happen tomorrow night at 7:30 when the PWHL takes over the rink, so to speak, on this takeover tour, as it's being called. And the Toronto Sceptres will be hosting the Montreal Victory tomorrow night at 7:30. It'll be a homecoming game for a bunch of people that are involved with these two teams. Of course, Blair Turnbull and Ali Monroe, both from Nova Scotia. But also a homecoming from the man behind the bench of the Toronto Sceptres and for the coach behind the bench of the Montreal Victory. They're both Nova Scotians as well, and we're very pleased on a very busy day for Coach Ryan, for Troy Ryan to be joining us here to share a little bit of his thoughts heading into what will be a historic game here in Halifax. Coach Ryan, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. Pretty excited, and I appreciate the intro. We're very ecstatic to be here in Halifax and have the opportunity to play this game.
If we had asked you about 5 years ago, Troy, if we'd have a top-tier women's hockey league in Canada playing a game in Halifax on a December night, would you have thought that was possible?
I mean, obviously it's always been, in the plans or in the works, but for what the PWHL has been able to accomplish here in, a very short 3 years is just incredible. To have the opportunity to play at a place like the Scotiabank Centre in front of a full crowd is, truly special.
You've had lots of experience with Scotiabank Centre right in your career, playing in the minors, and then, of course, with SMU and then with Dalhousie.
Yeah, it just adds a whole different layer for me. I think, just to come home, flying into this airport, knowing you're part of such a special event and getting the opportunity to do it in front of friends and family is just an honor. And I mean, to be able to do it, you mentioned at the front of the show there that to do it with like a Blair Turnbull and an Ali Monroe, it just gives a little bit of a different vibe heading into this game tomorrow night. Lots
of events are planned, Troy, throughout the next couple of days to celebrate, but I'm going to focus a little bit on the game itself and what we can expect to see. This Toronto-Montreal, is it a rivalry? Can we call it that?
Yeah, for sure. I think we just generally picked up where the Toronto-Montreal rivalry in many different sports is, it's so heightened that, we picked up in year one. Had a ton of battles against them. Our last game here, we had an international break, but our last game was against Montreal, and it was we ended up losing that game, but it was a very physical game. So I would expect nothing but the same in this one on Wednesday night.
And 4 games into the season, Toronto-Montreal tied for second place. So that's an indication of the importance of this game, not just for growing the game here in Halifax, but for the season itself.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to be in a battle with Montreal the entire year. They're a great team with a lot of stars, and then obviously coached very well with Corey Chevrier from Nova Scotia. So we're excited about that. And I think the big thing about these takeover tours is, like you said, is just kind of leaving your mark in some different communities and showcasing the great product of women's hockey. So we're just really excited about the opportunity, and it, like I said, a special kind of evening to be able to do this in my hometown.
Absolutely, and the Scotiabank Centre has a reputation of being a rather boisterous place, so I would imagine that you and the team are looking forward to that.
Yeah, for sure. They have a ton of great events. We have a practice this morning that's, both us and Montreal have a practice. It's open to the public. We also have a couple coaching events that's going to go on, some autograph sessions. So the host here has been unbelievable. We just walked into the Scotiabank Centre, and the Mooseheads were generous enough to provide us with their space. So just getting treated great, not a surprise at all coming to Halifax, and we're just excited to hopefully put on a great show here Wednesday night.
How important is the PWHL and games like this, Troy, to growing the sport at the grassroots in Nova Scotia and right across the country?
Yeah, I think it's a big part of our responsibility to do our best to continue to grow the game. And, I get kind of a front row seat to it and coming into different communities and seeing the young girls that are aspiring to play at the professional level. It's incredible. And I also, obviously, being a kind of a guest, if you will, in the women's game, I also see the impact that it's having on young boys and how they look up to our players. And I think that has got to have, a positive impact, whether it's, how young boys would see a young girl that's possibly playing, minor hockey. I think it just changes the perception of a lot. So I think the PWHL has done such a great job. Our athletes do such a great job in just representing the product and being an inspiration for any young athletes that are looking to be professional athletes.
Obviously, tonight's game super important, and this season super important as well for the Sceptres organization and the league as well. But of course, Canadian eyes are starting to look towards Italy and to 2026 and the Olympic Games, and of course, you'll be behind the bench with that team as well. Big decisions to be made here by the end of the year, correct?
Yeah, for sure. We just wrapped up our rivalry series and. Obviously didn't get the results that we wanted. A lot of focus was on the player selection, and we got a lot of work to do. Although, normally we have our centralization process where we've got kind of hands on our group the entire for an 8-month period, and with the start of the PWHL, we get a little less time with them. So we're going to have to maximize our time virtually to try to do our best to kind of. Right some wrongs that were done here in the rivalry series and hopefully put our best foot forward and have some success in Italy coming up here in February.
I know, Troy, you're not going to tip your hand before the 31st deadline, but is it safe to say that there'll be some Blue Noser content on Team Canada heading to the Olympics?
Well, I sure hope so. Obviously, someone like a Blair Turnbull has been a great leader for our group. And it's been so fun for me as a coach to be able to kind of have this exciting kind of ride and do it along someone like that. So, Blair's been a great player and a great leader for the Toronto Sceptres, but also a great leader for the national team as well.
There's an open practice that Coach Ryan was telling us about. That's going to happen in about an hour's time, and then an autograph session later this afternoon, all in a lead up to the big game tomorrow night at 7:30 at Scotiabank Centre. Coach Ryan, I appreciate you spending some time with us on a busy day. Best of luck tomorrow night, and we'll see you on the ice. Awesome.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Troy. That is Coach Troy Ryan, the head coach of the Toronto Sceptres. Of course, Corey Chevrier, the head coach of the Montreal Victory, is also a Nova Scotian. She's from New Glasgow. So there's plenty of Nova Scotia talent in this first takeover game. We're actually very lucky because we are not only having one of these takeover games, we're having two of these takeover games. There will be a second one in the new year with the Halifax kind of at the center of some talk maybe about seeing how this goes and seeing how the reception for the PWHL is here. And with the league looking at expansion, I don't know, can you put 2 and 2 together? Wouldn't that be something? Anyway, best of luck to both sides. Best of luck to all of the Nova Scotia players that are taking part. It's got to be something special, right? You get to come home and you get to play in front of the crazy fans down at Scotiabank Centre. It will be a lot of fun to watch, and of course, we'll keep our eye. 31st of December is the deadline for both the men's and women's team to announce their rosters. If you were watching Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday night, Elliot Friedman suggesting that Team Canada is probably going to do that New Year's Eve. and won't tip their hand, of course, until they do. And that is, of course, for the women's team and for the men's team. And, of course, I think it's safe to say that there's going to be some Nova Scotia content on the women's team. And we already know that Sidney Crosby and Nathan McKinnon and Brad Marchand likely to be part of Team Canada as well on the men's side. So there should be some Nova Scotia flags flying high at the arena, if it gets finished, in Italy, even though it's 4 feet short, at the Olympic Games. Wouldn't that be something, right? Nova Scotia is certainly has it figured out when it comes to cultivating talent and cultivating hockey players and getting them to the highest levels of the sport. And you can do it from here, right? You can do it from the smallest town in Nova Scotia to the biggest city in Canada. You can be a professional hockey player now for both men and women, and that is absolutely outstanding. We're going to take our first break here on the program today. When we come back, a conversation about human rights when it comes to women migrant workers in Nova Scotia. The executive director of the Centre for Migrant Workers' Rights Nova Scotia, Stacey Gomez, will be our guest. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. A new report released last week is shedding the light on the lives of women migrant workers who are employed on various farms and in seafood plants across the provinces, particularly particularly along the North Shore. The reports raising some alarms regarding human rights of the migrant worker community. The report calling for a number of things for the federal governments as well as funding agencies to improve protections and supports for migrant workers across Nova Scotia. Reported recommending for the feds to enact open work permits and permanent residence on arrival, an enforceable national housing standard, and the renewal of the Migrant Worker Support Program, which is set to expire in 2026. Very pleased to welcome into the show to shed a little bit of light on this report for us from the Centre for Migrant Worker Rights in Nova Scotia. That's Stacey Gomez. Stacey, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Appreciate you spending some time with us today. This is a wide-ranging report, and it certainly is shedding some light on some of the issues that migrant workers, particularly women in Nova Scotia, are raising.
Yes, we spoke with dozens of women migrant workers in the North Shore of Nova Scotia. The women who shared their stories did so courageously, calling for much-needed changes.
Some of the issues with this, Stacey, in this report identified are housing and employer housing issues, overcrowding, and these kind of things. That has to be is quite a serious problem.
Yes, we heard from approximately 6% of our survey respondents that they were living in overcrowded conditions with a lack of privacy and not enough facilities, including washrooms, appliances like stoves. So it's very hard to work in these kinds of conditions. We also heard from women migrant workers in the agriculture sector that they're being required to request advance permission from their employers to have visitors in their houses. So we're seeing this overreach into workers in other aspects of workers' lives beyond the workplace.
It's one of the quotes is that it felt like they were in a prison. It feels very restrictive for these workers who have time off and would necessarily have people come visit them in their houses.
Yes, for sure. These women, the stories that they told really highlight that they're not being treated with dignity and equality. And at the end of the day, that's what they're calling for, is just the same treatment that any other human being in this country has access to.
We've heard stories in the past, Stacey, about working conditions for migrant workers in Nova Scotia, and this report certainly puts an exclamation point on some of those concerns as well, particularly in the agriculture sector.
Yes, so we heard from 70% of our survey respondents from the agriculture sector reported being required to work outdoors in bad or extreme weather conditions that some described as being harmful for their health. So, for example, there was a woman migrant worker from Jamaica who said that whether, it was extreme heat when people, Canadians, were avoiding it at all costs, they were out there in the extreme heat where you could get a heat stroke in 5 minutes, but also whether it was raining, storming, or freezing, they were always outside working. So really highlighting the extreme conditions that they're made to work under.
Conditions that a Nova Scotia worker likely wouldn't be working in.
Yes, for sure, because of their precarious and vulnerable situation as migrant workers, where they're tied to one employer, so they don't have a right to work anywhere else legally. And they also have a temporary immigration status, so they can easily be fired and sent back to their home country. This puts them in the really difficult situation where, they're facing unsafe conditions, and it's difficult to say no because of all these risks that you face as a migrant worker.
Stacey, another section of the report focusing on the seafood processing sector and some employers not living up to their promises of a number of hours that they're working, and as you mentioned before, because a migrant worker is tied to one job and is unable to legally go and get a side gig to do something, they end up with a much smaller paycheck than they had anticipated.
Yes, that is a chronic issue that we hear in the seafood processing sector. And, we had women sharing that they had to make the difficult choice of whether they would eat or whether they would send money to their home country for their children, because the majority of these women are, here providing for their families in their home countries. And they're, put in a very difficult situation without being able to, work anywhere else to supplement their income.
Women also identifying a gender bias when it comes to handing out those hours as well, with a emphasis on the male side of the migrant worker rather than the female side.
Yes, that's right. So they shared that, in these situations where there's a lack of hours, the hours that are available are given to people of other nationalities or men, including, other men from Mexico, and that priority is always given to employing men, and that women's perspective or labors are not taken into account. That's one of the quotes that we heard from one of the women migrant workers. So that impacts their livelihoods and ability to provide for their families.
Stacey, what kind of supports are available for migrant workers out there? Do they have a network? Do they have a safety net?
One of the key challenges is the lack of supports available to migrant workers. So, for example, when we look at a lot of the services that exist in the community, including legal support, settlement services, migrant workers are often not eligible for these services because of their immigration status. We are an organization that began to address this gap that exists for supports for migrant workers. We provide rights education, we provide support services in situations of abuse, and we heard from 79% of the survey respondents indicated a need for essential information about their rights, services, and supports as a migrant worker upon arrival here to Nova Scotia. So it's definitely a need that exists. And that's why we are calling for the federal government to renew the Migrant Worker Support Program, which is set to expire in 2026, so that these essential support, including, in situations of abuse, as well as rights education, can continue. And there's hundreds of organizations like ours throughout the country that are providing this support, but that's set to expire in March.
Organization also calling for open work permits to address some of the issues we talked about earlier, and permanent residence on arrival. Can you explain that for me, please?
Yes. So in 2024, a United Nations report came to Canada to do a fact-finding mission about the state of migrant worker rights in the country. And they characterized the temporary foreign worker program as a breeding ground for contemporary forms of slavery because of the closed work permit system, because of the vulnerability faced by migrant workers. And so that is why the call is for open work permits on arrival, as well as permanent resident status on arrival. So migrant workers can fully exercise their rights without fear of deportation, so they can have their families with them. You know, we heard from a lot of mothers that are separated from their families, including their children, and also so that they can have access to essential services like healthcare. They pay taxes same as anyone else, but they're denied access to so many essential services like healthcare. And so those are the calls that the report is making at the federal level. But we know that responsibility also lies at the provincial level. So issues like healthcare, issues like labor standards, those are rules that need to be strengthened at the provincial level.
Stacey, I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Stacey Gomez, the Executive Director for the Centre for Migrant Workers' Rights in Nova Scotia. The new report released last week. You can pick it up on their website. There's some really alarming facts and figures in there from the migrant worker industry. We've heard the stories before of migrant workers being taken advantage of by employers. Now, I'm not going to suggest that all employers do, but the numbers in that report show that there's a significant issue with it, right? And it's rather an alarming read. We're going to take another break here on the program, and when we return, we're going to take a closer look at guaranteed basic income. I know we've talked about this on the show in the past as a solution to part of this affordability crisis and part of the issue with minimum wage. There's a group out there that's advocating for Basic Income Nova Scotia. The Nova Scotia government doesn't appear to have any inkling to even consider a guaranteed basic income here in Nova Scotia, but I think it's an important conversation to have. So we'll talk to Mandy Kay-Raining Bird, the chair of the group Basic Income Nova Scotia, as part of our program. And when we come back, Blake's going to update us on the news, and on the other side of that, a conversation with Sergeant Jeffrey MacFarlane from Nova Scotia RCMP. Nova Scotia showing some alarming numbers when it comes to human trafficking in 2024. We're going to dig in a little bit to what it is like here on the ground with Sergeant MacFarlane from the RCMP, and that will happen right after the update. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back. We have heard stories about human trafficking from Nova Scotia for several years here. And there's been some more recent stories that have come to light after Stats Canada has shown that Nova Scotia has one of if not the highest incidents of human trafficking reports to police in the last little while. So we're very happy that our next guest is able to join us today to shed a little bit of light of not necessarily on a case-by-case basis, but sort of a broad stroke of what things are like on the ground here. And we're very happy to welcome Sergeant Jeffrey MacFarlane, the manager of the Provincial Human Trafficking Unit of the RCMP, to the show. Sergeant MacFarlane, appreciate the time.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I guess that's the broad question to kind of start things off with here. We've seen the stats, we've heard the stories. You're on the ground on this every day. Is it as serious a problem as it's being made out to be?
It is a problem, yeah. But you know what? It's not just centered on Nova Scotia. You know, we hear a lot about this. Nova Scotia has the highest incidence per capita in the country for human trafficking. And it can be a bit misleading. First, it's important to remember that it is per capita. It doesn't mean we have the most instances anywhere. But what it does mean is that we're having more reports coming into the police. And, you know, we like to think a lot of that comes down to the fact that we've had a dedicated unit here for the province for coming up on 7 years. And, you know, because of that, we've had a lot more time than other provinces to increase our education, our outreach, and open up those avenues for people to come and report their exploitation to the police. So although the numbers are high, we actually kind of see that as a good thing because people are able to come, feel comfortable speaking to the police, specifically to the human trafficking unit, and, telling their story to us and finding different ways that we can assist them in leaving the exploitation. Sometimes that's through the court process, and sometimes it's, just hooking them up with the different non-government agencies and support groups around the province that can help with, getting them the assistance they need to move on, which, includes housing, addiction support, mental health support, like all the different, whatever it is that they're struggling with that's brought them into this situation. And, so that's really a lot of it. The numbers are high, there's no doubt. And frankly, we also know it's an underreported crime. So the numbers are probably even higher everywhere in the country. But, that's generally, the situation here in Nova Scotia right now. We do have a lot of reports coming in, and we're able to help a lot of people.
Sometimes, having a successful program is a little bit detrimental to the stats, right? If more people are coming forward, as you mentioned, and reporting this kind of crime, then you obviously learn more, and then it may skew those numbers a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sergeant MacFarlane, I guess the bigger question is Nova Scotia, as you mentioned, is we see the stats, right? I get it. Why is it so prevalent here? Is it geography? Is it economy? Is it a combination of both?
It's hard to really put a finger on exactly, one issue. It does come down to a lot of things. People would say, well, we're, a port city, for example. So there's people coming in from different, potentially even across borders into Halifax in order to be exploited through to, the rest of Canada or really wherever it is that the trafficker is expecting to take them, if that's exactly what's going on. But, that's really just one element. The truth is people end up in exploitation through human trafficking often because that trafficker is finding something that they're missing, and they're looking to exploit that. So it's kind of a bit of a misnomer, I guess, that, these trafficking situations are like the movie Taken, right? Someone's being grabbed and kidnapped and taken off to a foreign country and, abused and all that sort of thing. The truth is, the vast, vast majority of these instances of human trafficking for the purpose of sex, it's really usually caused by someone who the person knows, and very often it's actually someone that they're in an intimate relationship with. So because of that, they try to form a relationship with the victim. They identify what it is that they're missing in their life, and maybe it's as simple as money, or they need a place to stay, or they want access to a better life in terms of apartments and, anything at all, even vehicles, like access to that. So the trafficker will find that and exploit it. So when you talk about Nova Scotia, like why is it the numbers are higher? It can come down really to economic status in a lot of ways as well. And, if people are suffering across the province and they're looking for opportunities to move on to a different point in their life or to get whatever it is that this trafficker is promising. And it can be something like, I've got a condo in Montreal and I'm going to set you up there and it's going to be a great life for you. And that sounds great when you're coming from maybe an area of the province where, you don't have those opportunities. So as I say, there's really no just one exact way or reason that Nova Scotia is experiencing this, but I really do believe the numbers are the same across the country. It's just the amount of reports that are coming in and the comfort victims have. Mm-hmm.
Sergeant, is it organized crime that is driving this, or is it a different element?
So it's a good question. So as I mentioned, a lot of them, really the majority could be people that someone who's you've been in a relationship with. That's where it could start. But even in the organized crime world, which is essentially just three or more people organizing, a group essentially to commit crimes. And it can include exploiting people in human trafficking. It could also be, thefts or frauds or really anything that's going to make money for this group. So yes, there's a component of human trafficking, certainly in, a component of organized crime in human trafficking for sure. It's not every time, but there are certainly organized groups across the province that are involved in this.
Sergeant MacFarlane, if we think that our child or our friend or an acquaintance may be falling victim to human trafficking, what's the best way to help them?
Right. So for years now, we've operated a hotline for human trafficking victims and people that are looking to support them. So that could be police officers on the road. It could be social workers, teachers, anybody. You can call this number. It's not. You're not going to the police dispatch. We're not going to send a patrol car over to your house. It literally just goes to the cell phone that one of the members on my team that are specially trained to handle human trafficking cases, they have it in their hand. And you call that number and you can ask those questions. This is what I'm seeing. This is whether it's a loved one, a friend, or if it's you yourself, and you're just not quite sure what's going on. You can call this number. And I'll give you the number now. It's 902-449-2425. So 449-2425. And, as I said at the beginning, it's not about, arresting someone or going to court and testifying or anything. If that's the route that you decide to take, then we're happy to do that. But we have lots of other options. And sometimes it's just talking about options of how to get out of the situation that you're in.
Sergeant MacFarlane, I know you're busy. I appreciate your time today.
All right. Thanks.
That is Sergeant
Have a good day.
Jeffrey MacFarlane from the Human Trafficking Unit for the RCMP here in Nova Scotia. It's a crime that happens more often than it should. It should never happen, and it happens quite frequently. Nova Scotia showing some of the highest rates per capita in the country when it comes to human trafficking. And if you think you're being trafficked, or if you think that one of your friends or family members, or even just an acquaintance that may be into a situation that could lead to human trafficking, 902-449-2425. Keep that one in your phone. That could be an important call that saves somebody's life. Going to take yet another break here on the program. When we return, guaranteed basic income. Been a lot of talk about it. The government doesn't seem to, in Nova Scotia anyway, doesn't seem to have much of a appetite to talk about it, but there has been a lot of discussion about guaranteed basic income. So I thought it important to bring the chair of an advocacy group called Basic Income Nova Scotia to the show to tell us a little bit about this program and how it works and what benefits it would have. Mandy Kay-Raining Bird will be joining us after the break. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. We're back in minutes. This article posted earlier this month on the CBC's website reads as follows. The province's Deputy Minister of Social Development says the potential cost and questions about federal support top the reasons why the Nova Scotia government is not prepared to consider the introduction of guaranteed basic income. Greg Beaton telling reporters that the cost to implement the program is the biggest prohibitive factor. He goes on to say, we don't think that right now is the time to be able to consider looking at this more broadly, he said, following an appearance before the Legislature's Standing Committee on Community Services. Our next guest presented at that meeting, and I'm very pleased to welcome to the show to tell us a little bit more about guaranteed basic income, the chair of the advocacy group, Basic Income Nova Scotia. That's Mandy Kay-Raining Bird. Mandy, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Sure. No, we've talked about guaranteed basic income on this program before, and I still think there's including myself, a lot of questions about what it is. So let's set the table here and tell everybody what exactly guaranteed basic income is.
Okay, so the definition of a guaranteed basic income is one that is embraced by all of the advocacy groups across the country of Canada. And the definition is a direct payment from government to ensure that everyone has a sufficient income to meet their basic needs, participate in society, and live with dignity regardless of work status. So that form of a basic income would be income tested, but it wouldn't have any other intrusive or demeaning requirements to meet basic income. And in order to administer it in a way that does not have intrusive requirements, it should be administered through the Canada Revenue Agency, just as OAS-GIS is administered or the CCB is administered. There are also a number of principles that have been identified by advocacy groups across the country that should be met in creating a basic income, and these include: it should be universally accessible. That means that everyone who needs it would get it. That it should be unconditional, as I said before, except for income testing. That it should be a component of a broad social safety net. So alone, a basic income is not enough. It's an essential component, but needs other supports and services to ensure that we all live a decent life here in Canada. It should be sufficient, so it's set at a level at or above the poverty line. It should be responsive to changing circumstances, so that it's simple to access, and if people's circumstances change, the benefit could be provided if they now need it and didn't before, or modified if their circumstances change. One of the reasons that this is really important is that, for example, we've identified here in Nova Scotia that there is a problem with women and children being abused in their homes. And if women are able to leave the home and have adequate income to live on, then they have that autonomy that is necessary for them to be able to make the choices that are best for themselves. The last principles are respect for autonomy and respect for Indigenous self-determination.
I was under the impression that a guaranteed basic income would replace some of the social safety net that we have become accustomed to in Nova Scotia. Is that true?
That's very true. It would replace, presumably, maybe not completely or immediately, social assistance rates, which are currently well below the poverty line, and force people to live in fact, deep poverty here in Nova Scotia. That would be one of the areas that could be subsumed within a basic income. And of course, there are other possibilities, and that would depend upon which of these possibilities would depend upon what is negotiated between the federal and provincial government. So this is not something that can be implemented solely by the province. It requires the province and the federal government to work together.
How would it work for somebody that was employed? Would it be clawed back as you made income? How does that work?
Yes, it would be, but at a rate that would always make it more beneficial for an individual to be working. So the clawback rate, as you call it, would be no more than 50% on the dollar. So what that means is somebody who does not have paid income through work would get the full benefit. And if they did have income through work, for every dollar they made, 50 cents of that would be taken away on the benefit to the point where the benefit is reduced to zero. So what that means is that you would always benefit from working, from paid work, but that those with high incomes would receive no benefit at all.
What is your response to the argument against basic income that I hear a lot here is that, well, people just won't work?
That's not true. I mean, there's lots of research out there to show that when people are on a basic income, there's two pilot studies that have been done here in Canada. One that was completed in Manitoba in the 1970s, and another that was not completed, that was cut short in Ontario in more recent years. Both of them showed that people continued to work or found more stable work with a basic income. There were two groups of people who would work somewhat less. One of those would be youth who would remain in school or go back to school, and the other were people who needed to support family members or others through caregiving. And that's one of the benefits of a basic income is, we talk about work as if paid work is the only work that we do in our society, but we do many types of work that we don't get paid for. And caregiving often is that type of work.
The cost. Obviously, that is one of the questions people have about this is this, or would it be more expensive for the government of Canada, the government of Nova Scotia, to administer a basic income than deal with the social safety net that it has now?
Well, one of the words that you used there was administer basic income. If it was administered through the CRA, then the cost of administration itself would go down dramatically. Right now, we have a social assistance system that requires people to prove that they need the help that they are so desperate for. And if it were administered through the CRA, then those hoops that people currently have to jump through would not be present. Yes, a basic income, if it were available and sufficient to meet the basic needs of people, would cost more than the current social assistance system, which keeps people in poverty, oftentimes in deep poverty. But we need to think about the benefits of a basic income. One of them is that it would replace that failing social assistance system, and it would ensure that people have enough money to meet their basic needs, and that improves health and well-being, both mental health and physical health, and it also reduces crime. There have been studies that have shown, for example, that a basic income would reduce hospital visits and doctor visits by about 8.5%. That's a lot of money. And that would relieve some of the problems that we're experiencing in the ERs here in Nova Scotia. It also, there's a study that has shown that it would reduce violent crime and crimes of desperation by 17.5%, which would free up a lot of money within the policing and incarceration systems. After all, if you don't have enough money to live on, you're driven to do things that you wouldn't otherwise do. And the stress creates mental health difficulties that lead you to try to assuage your problems by, for example, using drugs more or something. With a basic income, that stress, those uses would decline and mental health would improve, and people would get the help that they need.
Fascinating information. We're out of time. I appreciate yours today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your interest in this, and I hope very fervently that this federal and provincial government will work together to implement a basic income and spread it across the country.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
That is Mandy Kay-Raining Bird, the chair of the advocacy group Basic Income Nova Scotia. Time for the open hour, folks. The line's open, 902-405-6000, 1-877-781-8255. It's the regular rules. You can talk about whatever it is on your mind, but a story I heard today's got a bee in my bonnet. I'll tell you about it after the news. Welcome back. It is the Tuesday edition of the Open Hour. The lines are open, folks. 902-405-6000, 1-877-781-8255. What's in the news today? Well, a new study out there showing that Nova Scotia shows numbers above the national average when it comes to traffic accidents. Interesting, isn't it? We talk about driving. We talk about driving behaviors. We talk about engineering of streets. And yet, we're still seeing numbers that are above the national average. Not the highest in the country. PEI gets that distinction. But higher than average. I don't think that should come as a surprise to anybody that listens in the morning and on the afternoon drive to our traffic reports. There is every single day on the way home and in the way to work, a collision somewhere. But these numbers kind of put the exclamation point on those. Did you read the story in the CBC this morning? And this isn't the one that has my blood pressure a little higher today, but it should. Did you read about the Nova Scotia guy that has a cottage and turns the power off at his cottage in the wintertime, uses it in the summer? It says his bill when he's using it in the summer is about $100 per bill. Then when he leaves there, he at the panel shuts her off, right? Shuts it down, opens the fridge up, there is no electricity at all flowing into his cottage, which I know many of you do, right? You winterize your pipes and you turn the power off so that there's no problems, no chance of an electrical fire, those kind of things, and you're not paying for electricity. He usually says he pays about $50 for electricity because of that. Well, he got a bill for $500 for his cottage for a period that he's not there and the power's off. Here we go again, right? With this estimated billing. He's never got a $500 bill for that. At least that's what I got out of the article. It's on the CBC's website, by the way. It just goes on and on and on and on with that utility. In Ottawa, the Liberals are hinting at some more floor crossings. It's starting to me feel more like this whole political theater thing. Was the energy minister yesterday saying that he's fielding a lot of calls from disenfranchised conservatives. But I got to tell you, and if you were listening to our show on Friday, you know that Tim Powers and I were talking about this, that now that the Carney government is that one seat away from the hallowed ground of a majority government, that the full court press is on, I will imagine that those phone calls are going both ways. But it appears, at least on the surface, that we may not be done with the floor crossings from the Conservatives to the Liberals. Moncton's deputy fire chief, we don't talk about Moncton a lot on the show, but Moncton's deputy fire chief says they have had this year, in 2025, 13 fires resulting from e-scooters and e-bikes in that municipality. 13 fires on the charging circuits of the e-bikes and the e-scooters. They're recommending that you not leave your e-bike alone when it's charging. I bet you that, and I don't have one. In fact, I don't think I know anybody that has one. Some of them that you can detach and take the battery inside and plug it in. I would imagine that would be what you would do. But if they don't, you'd sit in in your porch or in your garage and wait for the battery to charge so that it doesn't burn your garage down? 13 fires in Moncton that have been a direct result of e-bikes or e-scooters. I wonder what the numbers are here in Nova Scotia. And the story that's got me perturbed this morning, and maybe I'm off the mark here, and everything has context to it. But there's a story that the Canadian Press put out today. It's the story of a 21-year-old political science graduate. Doesn't say which province. I'm assuming from Ontario. Yes. And she says that in 4 months, she's put out 50 applications, had 2 interviews, and still doesn't have a job. Just graduated, 21 years old, doesn't have a job. Submitted 450 resumes. The story goes on. And we've heard the issues with youth employment, right? Or unemployment, I guess, is probably the better way to describe it. She said she feels rejected, and feeling the rejections is difficult, and everybody that has ever been rejected for a job will tell you that. She said, I feel behind. Even though I just graduated, I don't really have any stability in my life or even a schedule for me. I just go day to day. It's really stressful. But this is where it raised my eyebrows. The article goes on to say many young people who spoke to the Canadian Press, it's a Canadian Press article, recognize this disillusionment, a waning belief that hard work will result in the quality of life their parents and grandparents were able to secure. When I heard that this morning, I was like, hey, wait a minute. I'm going to suggest that the 21-year-old university graduate has no idea what it was like when her grandparents were 21. Or let's take it back another generation. To her great-grandparents, or even her parents. I think that the expectation of quality of life for my parents, your parents, Vanessa's parents, is different than that of a 21-year-old in 2025. I come from a family, we certainly didn't suffer, but we certainly didn't have a lot of money. We didn't take vacations. We had one car. We never ate out. And that was normal in my neighborhood. In fact, we were talking about this in the newsroom. Somebody in my neighborhood had 2 cars in their yard. It was abnormal. Other than a clunker on blocks. But you know what I'm talking about. Right? So, is that even a fair argument to say that they want to have here's the actual quote, hard work will result in the quality of life that their parents and their grandparents were able to secure? I'm interested in your thoughts on that. I understand youth unemployment. I understand that the job market's tough. I understand that when you're leaving university or college or high school even, and getting out on your own, it's difficult. But didn't we all go through that? 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I'm interested in your thoughts on that. Lots of emails yesterday, very quickly before we go to break. Lots of emails yesterday on a suggestion that I made about council salaries. I said yesterday that maybe it's time that part of the remuneration process that councillors at the city level get a set of key performance indicators. Got a lot of emails on it yesterday suggesting that that's probably a good thing. Regional council at this point, and I stand to be corrected if a councillor or former councillor wants to call up and say that that's just, you're wrong, Dan, but what's the goal? What is the goal of a city council? Like, when you take office, what is the goal? Is it to balance the budget? Is it to put new stuff into your community? Is it to get reelected? What's the goal? So by instituting KPIs or key performance indicators, I think I said yesterday 5% reduction or 5% increase in non-tax revenue, 5% reduction in or a 5% improvement, I think was the word I used, in transit on time performance, and keeping the budget under CPI. Tax increases under CPI, not budget increases. Then there's a goal. There's a stated goal. Right now, I don't know what the goal of a council is. To run the municipality is pretty broad. Might be something you want to talk about. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Let's go to Ron. Ron, how are you?
Hi, Dan. I just thought you were going to break.
No.
Anyway,
go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to talk about that tragedy that happened in L.A. on Sunday afternoon. It's Rob Reiner.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah. Little story here. I started watching All in the Family when I was about 15. I think my dad was watching it before that a little bit, and I used to hear him laugh a little bit here and there, and which you don't hear too much. So I started watching it along with him, and I watched it for many years. And then later on, I was able to move to Toronto and find a job and got my first TV, and they were showing repeats All in the Family at that time. And I started recording them all, and I still have about 3 or 4 VHS tapes full of All in the Family.
Right.
But later on, while I was living in Toronto, I was an audiophile back then as well, and there was a turntable that was available, and I had to go to selling it, and I drove up to his place and to buy it. And when I walked in, he was playing some music there that I was kind of unfamiliar with, and a little bit of jazz, piano stuff. And I asked him what he was listening to, and he said, "When Harry Met Sally" soundtrack. So
right.
that was Harry Connick Jr. that made that, and
he did.
So that was there, and then just a minute here.
You there, Ron?
Yeah, I'm here now. So that year when I was in Toronto, there I started watching them. And I realized how familiar Edith Bunker was on that show. That she resembled my mother so much, and I lost my mom when I was like 16. So
right.
Watching that was like resemblance, and that really brought back some more memories. But so I even ironically I even have a password that which was used in All in the Family to describe Mike, and I did that, and then
you better change it now because I know what it is.
Well, that's okay.
All right.
But then later on, just a few weeks ago, I was watching TV there, and I seen All in the Families on CHCH. Eastlake was 609, but they're repeating that again on around 6 o'clock at night. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So I started watching and recording it all again.
There you go.
So,
Ron, I appreciate it, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're back after the break. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. It's the open hour, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Normal rules apply. Talk about whatever it is on your mind. Again, 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Let's go to the phones and say hello to Glenn. Glenn, how are you?
Good, Dan. Good morning. Listen, I'm calling because a couple things sparked my interest. Sure. I'm calling about scooters, of course.
Yep.
And I plan on speaking about scooters anytime I call in. I'm not looking to be a regular caller. I'll let all the professional, regular people that call in, like Chris and Gloria McCluskey and Jim Hoskins, to look after all that. But what brought my attention to calling in today was with the dangerous reputation Nova Scotia has, number one. And I want to defend the people that are on scooters because I think 99.9% of them are good, honest people. They're not criminals. Most of them are young people. And they're on the safest place, which is the sidewalk, to protect themselves. And, I think most of them are probably careful going around with people. I wanted to bring out the liabilities just to maybe think that it might spark some interest with the counselors. But, I looked up this bylaw. It's M300, micromobility bylaw. And there's not a lot of options for scooters. There is the streets where traffic is, the bike lanes, and trails, which you're not going to see trails in the middle of Halifax. And I do have something I want to ask you that what you think of, but
sure.
If this consulting firm that you spoke to on Friday, if they're going to take a year to look at the whole infrastructure of HRM,
right?
And let's say they decided to cut back on bike lanes. Now, that's another issue that I don't want to get involved with, but bike lanes right now, they start and they end, right? There's no continuation. So let's say if these scooters were approved and they had to stay off the sidewalks, they had to use the street and bike lanes, and the bike lanes ended if they were on one, and they may even get cut back. So they'd have to go on the street. And those helmets that are strapped onto these rental scooters, I wouldn't put one on my head. Maybe they won't fit. Maybe they're wet. Maybe someone else had them on their head that maybe they had a condition, but they don't wear them anyway. So they're on the streets right beside buses and cars, and I think it's massively dangerous for these people to end up on the streets with no helmets and driving beside heavy metals. So what are we saying to our youth? Are we saying, here, jump on these scooters because we approve them and risk your lives? So that's one thing I just wanted to get straight, that I think we should be protecting the people on the streets. They're vulnerable. Some of them in my area, you're looking at the blind use the sidewalks, elderly on wheelchairs, and even families that walk hand in hand with their children. They can't hear these things coming up behind them.
Right.
So, I think it's a real catch-22. It could be a Pandora's box that they're opening up. Who knows? But to put these scooters on the streets, that's why I think that they should be canceled and forget it. We could set an example maybe. There are some countries in Europe that are taking them right off the streets. They're canceling them. So I thought of two things. What about a plebiscite for each district to vote on these scooters,
right, and
e-bikes, and get maybe a better opinion on what the people say? And also, what about a micro transit, for example? If there was loops in the city that ran north to south, east to west, and all they were passenger vans, where it would be easier for them to hire people because they wouldn't need to have to know how to operate a bus, and they could pick people up for $2, for example, take them from Leeds Street down to the hospital or all the way down to Inglis and loop back up through Summer Street and Tower Road and end up on Agricola and just keep those loops up and parallel them north to south and parallel them east to west. They would be fast. They would be 3 or 4 vehicles per loop. They could lease them for now. Just wondering what you think of that, and you can give your opinion, and then I'll sign off.
All right, Glenn, I appreciate that, sir. I think the taxi and the ride-sharing industry might have an issue with that. You'd be directly competing with what is probably their core business. That being said, there's been a discussion in the past about the sizes of transit the length and the size of buses. Not necessarily here in the peninsula. I look out my window here quite frequently, and I look at the buses, and to me they look like they're very well populated. There's a lot of people on them, but there are some areas that have lost bus routes. There are some areas where ridership is low, and maybe a van option or a smaller bus option might be an alternative. That is something I'm sure that transit people would want to take a look at. I appreciate the call. We need to stop and take a break. On the other side of it, the open hour continues. Lots of lines open, folks. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Back after the break. Welcome back. Open Hour continues. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. That's the number. Lines are open. If you want to join the conversation, it's easy. Just dial the numbers. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. We go right to the phones and say hello to Sean. Sean, how are you?
Good morning, Dan. How are you?
I'm well. What's on your mind today?
Well, to start with, your opening monologue had me a little intimidated because I'm not calling about anything that you stated.
Sure.
First-time caller, long-time listener, by the way.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So I was listening yesterday, okay? Let's just chalk this up real quick. I'm a regular blue-collar guy, office job in the building material industry. You know what I mean? I chose what I do for a living.
Okay.
But yesterday we were talking about the counselors and pay increases. And I might be an oddity here. I might get Chris mad at me here, but I'm a firm believer in nobody should be denied the opportunity to get a pay raise in what's a reasonable increase. Being a counselor is probably one of the hardest jobs around, especially in the time of social media, an older generation, especially here in Nova Scotia. It's just like, it's a nonstop job. It's a let's say this 25-hour a day job. And I'm all for them getting an increase, especially, if you can't really argue with it. I don't know how you feel about that. I know there's a few older generation callers that do not like it. When I say older generation, I'm 47, so it's I'm not young and I'm not old, but we got to stop saying government workers don't deserve an increase because they afford to live as well.
And I'll agree with you to a point, Sean, but just to pick an arbitrary number of 4%, which is likely more than you're going to get this year, right? And likely more than I'm probably going to get this year. At least maybe I do. I don't know. I haven't found out yet.
Yeah, I know. Either do I. We'll see how our profits were last year.
Right.
But I averaged about 3 a year in my job. All right. And, I've been here 25 years. I'm not rich, but I make a living and I shut off at 4 p.m. Unlike a counselor, I email my listen, I grew up, I lived where Tim Oathit was, top-notch guy. Jean Saint-Amand has filled in for the last year. You know what? If I emailed this guy on Sunday to mention something about traffic lights, he was on it within minutes, and that's on a Sunday morning. So, my appreciation for the work that they do, we got to have a little more patience with them. They make a lot of decisions that I shake my head at, but a 4% increase to me, if they don't get one every year, I think that's pretty decent.
Sean, let me ask you this question very quickly before we let you go. If the building supply company that you work for was facing a large deficit in funds, if they were looking to eliminate expenses so that they could break even, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they came to you and said, "Hey, look, Sean, can't give you a raise this year because we're in a bad financial state." Yet
you remember
your bosses still take their 4% increase year over year. How does that make you feel?
Well, I remember COVID. We remember 2020, 2021.
Absolutely.
So I understand that. And I didn't get one those 2 years. Right. And I didn't get a bump up of 6 to 8. I didn't get it doubled after we started booming again.
Got it.
Right. you know what, if I wanted to get, bosses raises and wages, like I said, I've been here 25 years. Mm-hmm. I'm good at what I'm doing. If I wanted to get those wages, I would apply to be better than what I am. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
I choose what I do, and, it's just the way I feel that it should be happening.
Appreciate the call, Sean. Thanks for calling.
All right.
Look forward to hearing from you again. All right.
All right, brother.
Have a good one. Cheers. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I don't think that anybody is saying that counselors don't deserve an increase. But when we're in a situation that we're in, and we're looking at a 10.5% increase in taxes just to make the books balance, and they're going to ask us to pay whatever the number is going to be, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever the final number is going to be, percent increase in rate. I mentioned optics yesterday. Wouldn't the optics look better if they also gave up a little bit? 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, Ken.
Hi, Dan. I'm gonna go against your last caller.
Sure.
Just out of curiosity, when Sam got to the building there yesterday, did he was his nose red or icicles hanging off his nose or his ears red or anything like that?
He was in a T-shirt.
He was in a T-shirt.
Yeah,
so he didn't ride his bike to the studio? Is that what you're telling me?
I didn't see it, and I didn't see his helmet. And usually when he comes in and he rides his bike, he's out of breath. So I'm going to say I'm 90% sure he didn't ride his bike yesterday.
Okay, so there's only 15,998 or 99 because you seen one yesterday.
I did.
To be on bikes, and then we're right up to what he professed as 16,000 on bikes during the winter months.
Yeah.
Now, what your last caller was saying that they deserve it. Some of them, yes, they do deserve it. But Sam Austin is a classic example of why they should not get a raise. When you're trying to put in bike lanes in your area and your constituents don't want it, and they've made up a Facebook page and they're having meetings without you and everything else. That's part one. Okay, part two is developers being able to send money to councillors or the mayor or whoever the politicians are to get elected, right? And then when somebody asked him about parking yesterday, what was his answer? Oh, we're not responsible for parking. Well, no, of course. Sean or Sam, do you have a big lot that everybody can come over and park in your yard? Why would you, if you're the counselor and you're the proving, and of course they're going to go, oh, it wasn't me, it was our staff, right? If your staff or you or whoever that lets this building go up and let's say it's 20 floors, right? Let's say out in Enfield somewhere, right? And there's no parking anywhere. Winter storm comes along, you got nowhere to park. What's everybody to do? Now, whose fault is it because you let the developer put up that 20-story building without underground parking, without any parking around the streets, right? And he's going, not our fault. Well, if it's not your fault, then you shouldn't have approved it in the first place, right? Just to touch on two different things, what happened down in Sydney.
Right.
Well, we got to get our stuff together up here because guess what? Start taking over the streets, start taking over the colleges and all this stuff for their protests. Guess what's going to happen here next?
Well, I think that's a stretch, considering that the authorities in Australia have said that it was ISIS that was responsible for this, not for any other organization or group.
Well, it's on both sides, Dan. It doesn't matter whether it's one faction or the other faction. Either lock them up, deport them, or whatever the case may be. There be no segregation.
Let's just stop resorting to violence to solve stuff. How about that? Does that work?
Exactly. Yeah, but when there's no fear of anything, Dan, they're going to keep on doing it. They're not going to get arrested. They're going to go, oh, please, can you get off the street or can you stop your protest? Right? They're going to go.
But you're making a stretch from a group that are protesting what's happening in Gaza to ISIS, which is a long way apart, my friend.
Oh, is it?
It is. Islamic State is a terrorist organization.
Yeah, and it's all connected, Dan. It's all connected. And I don't care if you're, protesting for this or protesting for that or whatever. If you're breaking the law, you're breaking the law, and they do it every time, and there's absolutely nothing done about it. And I mean, let them go down to the States and protest down there, and then, you know, Trump and his deranged syndrome or whatever he calls down there, like, you know, he can fix them up down there. But, you know, it's going to happen here, Dan, eventually.
Thanks, Ken. I appreciate it, sir. It's we have to be very careful with that. It was the government of Australia has said that the two fellas that were that perpetrated this horrendous act of violence against that community that was celebrating a religious holiday were connected to ISIS, not to any of the protesting that Ken's referring to in our country and other places around the world. Islamic State, terrorist organization. I want to be very clear by saying that. We're back after the break. Welcome back. Email from Jason says, respectfully, Dan, I couldn't disagree with you more on your comparison of affordability and difficulty of life now versus when we were young or when our parents were young. Everything is relative, so the guy with 3 kids and a mortgage in the 70s or 80s felt like he was struggling to get by, and that is legitimate. But we have to look at the math, and then we see that life is exponentially more expensive for young people now. Here's a simple way to see the difference. Median house price, 1970, $24,000. Median house price in 2025, $680,000. Ratio 28 times. Federal minimum wage, $1.65 in 1970. Federal minimum wage in 2025, $17.75. That's 11% more. Full-time annual earnings, 40 hours a week, $3,300 in 1970, $35,600, 11 times more. Years to afford a house, around 7.3 years in 1970, 19.1 years in 2025. That's 2.6% worse. And I appreciate it, Jason. I truly do. But the way that this was portrayed was that kids are having a more difficult time getting by than their parents or their grandparents. And all of those things that you have listed, I'm sure are correct. And I get it. 28% more times more expensive to buy a house than it was when our parents did or our grandparents did. And I understand that, and I agree with that. That the gap between the ability to earn a house is much wider now. But it still wasn't easy for everybody, right? We didn't have access to as much cash as people do now. Not to say that it's right, but I mean credit was minimal, right? And the expectations of a lifestyle today are different than they were in the 70s. I said it earlier. We didn't do vacations. We didn't eat out. We didn't have 2 cars or more. So I think everything's relative, but I appreciate the email, Jason. I really do. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, Virginia.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to talk about what you were just talking about and the letter that you just read. The life, I think the kids think life is harder. Well, it is harder because you don't need like 25% or whatever to buy a house. You didn't need that back in the 70s or the 50s. Now you do. Another thing I wanted to talk about, the young girl, and I know you've had other callers calling about it, saying they put out like 400 resumes and they never got any answer back.
Right.
Well, when I was in high school, which was I finished in 1973.
Okay.
The same thing went on back then. I would put, I was in grade 11. I didn't have a part-time job, which most of my friends did. So I'd put resumes. However, if you you needed a heads up to go somewhere to know if they were hiring, right? And because most resumes are going to go in the garbage, And just because you went, and I'm not dissing people that went to university, they spend a lot of money to go to university. But if you're spending all this money to go to university, you can't come out and expect to get a job that you went to university to train for, whatever your specialty is. Sometimes you just have to take what comes to you first, and that will get you in doorways and places. But just sitting home on the computer, sending out 400 resumes, I really don't believe that's going to get you a job, waiting for somebody to call you. I mean, it wasn't like that 50 years ago, and I'm sure it's not like that today.
Well, we didn't have that option 50 years ago, did we, Virginia? It was boots on the ground.
Pardon me?
It was putting your boots on the ground when 50 years ago, because we didn't have that option.
That's correct. That's what I was just about to say.
Right.
And when I went to high school in the 70s, only the rich kids went to university. Or if you were really passionate about something and your parents had to sign a loan, for you to go to university. Most people back then, they had 5, 6 kids. I know my father wasn't prepared to sign loans for 6 kids to go to university, right? You know, like you said, you got on the ground and running, but I know things are more expensive, but as far as getting a job, I live in the rural area of New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and there's signs on doors everywhere, right? And even if, I can't see, maybe here they'll look at resumes, but in the big city in Halifax, no, if they want somebody, they want them today, and they're not going to go through 400 resumes to pick somebody out. That's just all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Virginia. I appreciate the call.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, Chris.
Good day. How are you, sir?
I am well. What's on your mind today?
Well, I liked your suggestion yesterday about getting a revenue increase and cutting various costs and the tax rate and so on.
Keeping the tax increase overall tax increase to CPI.
Yeah,
5% improvement on reliability of transit, and a 5% increase in non-tax revenue for the city.
Yeah, never going to happen.
Right?
And you know why it's never going to happen. Trish Purdy yesterday underscored one of the main reasons why it's not going to happen. You or a caller would ask for comment from the counselor. Usually Sam Austin was first. Then you'd go to Trish. And in almost every single case, what did she say? Well, I must agree with Sam. I have to agree with Sam. Can't these people think on their own?
Well, to be fair to Councillor Purdy, she did disagree with him on a couple of issues.
Yes, I said most of the things. She just agreed with him. And that's what a lot of them do down there. They defer to some of these ideological zealots, I call them, that we have down there. And Sam is one of them, and Sean, and my own councillor, Laura White, is another. And they just don't tend to think on their own. But as far as getting a raise, I think they're forgetting, first of all, what they were elected to do and what a councillor's job is.
What is a councillor's job?
Councillor's job is, in my opinion, is to represent the interests, the wishes, the needs of the majority of their constituents. To hell with what they think themselves that they might want personally, that doesn't even enter into the equation. It's what the majority of their constituents want. And there's not one councillor, in my opinion, that's doing that. Not one of them. You have to look at Halifax, or HRM, you have to look at it the same as a corporation, because essentially it is a pretty big corporation when you come right down to it. And if you had a company, a corporation, that's a $100 million operation, you need a certain level and ability of management, executive expertise, and so on to run and manage that company properly, right? All of a sudden, when you jump up the ladder to a $1.3 or $1.4 billion corporation, the same executives that are running the $100 million one, in most cases, they're not qualified to run something that's 10 or 15 times bigger than that. So you would have to step up the ladder with another level of expertise and executive ability and so on. We're not getting that. HRM has gone over the years from basically a $200 million corporation to a $1.4 billion corporation. The expertise on the council, in my opinion, may have even gone down. It hasn't gone up and kept up with what we need to run the city. Do you understand? You obviously understand the point I'm trying to make, or the analogy I'm making.
I do.
And what is your thoughts on that?
Well, Chris, we're almost out of time, so I'm going to put you on hold and wrap things up. Here's my thought on it. The CEO of a corporation, the board of a corporation, have stated goals. They have performance objectives. They have, as I've been using, KPIs, these key performance indicators, that in order for them to receive an increase in their remuneration or their bonuses or whatever it is in the corporate world, they have to hit those targets. To your point, Chris, when we say your job is to represent the wishes of the majority of the constituents, I think we all will agree with that. But that's not a tangible goal. That's not a something you can set a benchmark against. Maybe it's time that a job description for city council with some of these indicators, performance indicators that we've been talking about attached, is something that needs to be built into that formula for their raises. Because at the end of the day, you can say that you're representing the wishes of your constituents, but are you? Thanks to all of you who picked up the phones, dialed the numbers, and joined the conversation. I truly appreciate it. We're going to stop. Blake's going to get us an update on what's happening in the world. On the other side of it, time to change gears. You saw him on television last night. Didn't he look great? Dr. Rob Thacker, our friend, scientist, astrophysicist from St. Mary's University, will be here. We're talking science. Science Files is up next. All right, it's time for Science Files in the studio, fresh off his television appearance. He's still got the TV makeup on, and no, I'm kidding. Anyway, that is Dr. Rob Thacker. You saw him on CTV News Atlantic last night, sitting in the studio with Bruce Frisco, talking about the year-end review in science, and the number one question was going to be the number one question that I asked today, because all of the talk and all of the speculation and all of the conspiracy theories and all of the business.
You mean your regular programming?
Yeah, pretty much. The business that is 3i Atlas is going to come to fruition this week when we get as close, I think, as we are going to get Friday, to the asteroid or whatever, or the spaceship, when it gets as close to Earth as it's going to get. Rob, is this going to... I mean, obviously the science community has already debunked all of these theories with regards to alien origin and such. But I mean, are we still holding out hope that we might be wrong until this thing passes?
You know my answer to that one. It's a big fat no. So right. At the end of the day, there will be a small number of people who say, well, we won't know for sure until we've seen it leave the solar system and look for so-called acceleration anomalies. You know, there could be rockets in there somewhere. Yeah, well, okay, not quite that far. But no, it's as I said, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it probably is a duck. And this is the case. I mean, it is unusual in some ways, I will say that. Like its emissions of carbon dioxide compared to water, that's very high. And so amongst the highest we've ever measured for a comet. And so that says something about the planetary system, where it came from. What was the overall sort of like separation of the volatiles is what we call it. And so there's some interesting stuff there, but you can't really do a whole lot with just one, and that's the real challenge about it. And so over a period of time, I think we will find more of these. The Rubin telescope just coming online over the summer, there's definitely going to find some. That's already found 2,000 asteroids, right? And some of them are near-Earth ones for that matter. So there's already a lot more coming.
Difference between a comet and an asteroid?
I mean, comets in general come from farther out, right? That's really kind of how we separate the two, and there's dirty snowballs to give a sort of like rough idea of what they are. With asteroids in general tend to be more rocky. They can still have a lot of hydrated water-bearing minerals in them, and we actually think that that's how a lot of the water was actually brought to the Earth rather than by comets. There's a funny little issue with the type of water, the various isotopes of water, or the various isotopes of the atoms in the water, just to be absolutely precise. And so we have somewhat different values in comets versus what we get with hydrated minerals in asteroids. So we think most of the water that was supplied to the Earth was in fact supplied by hydrated minerals in asteroids.
So when a comet or an asteroid is approaching our solar system and it has these water-making elements on it, are those brought from where this thing originated?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it broke off something and is now here?
Yeah, so when we're forming a solar system, you've got to think of basically you have this, what we call debris disk. There's lots of basically stuff, right? And it's going to be rocky, it's going to be gas, it's going to be all dust, all mixed up and so on. And so over a period of time, the dust is actually sort of coagulating together, forming bigger and bigger things over a long period of time. Then you form rocks. Those rocks end up coming together under gravity and so on. And so you've got a lot of things that are going on at the same time. And in certain places in the solar system, you're going to have things that are forming where you get combinations of rocks and ice and things like that. And then once everything gets to a certain point, suddenly you can start having really powerful interactions that may, in some cases, throw these things out of the disk of the solar system. And that's what we think happened with this one.
So my limited knowledge of our research thus far, particularly in our solar system, is that we're looking for water as a basis of life. So is it plausible that when we see these comets and these asteroids that are approaching from galaxies far, far away, as the saying goes, that they could indicate that there is life out there? Well,
so one of the key maxims of looking for life right now is where there's water, there's life, right? It's not a perfect thing to use, but it's not a bad one, right? And so the challenge with that is you just can't get much from one object is the problem, right? So we want to know more about the distribution of water in the solar system and so on, particularly the distribution of water amongst the terrestrial planets and so on. So we think Venus did have a lot of water a long time ago, but it basically got boiled off. Similarly, same thing probably happened on Mars as well. That's basically there was a lot of water on the surface of Mars, but that basically boiled off at least 2 billion years ago, 3 billion years ago. And so really it's about knowing the overall distribution, right? And that's the key thing. Like I said, the problem with 3i Atlas is you have one object whizzing through and you don't know where it came from, right? So you can measure all of its properties and then you've literally got all of these properties written down and you go, can't tell too much from that. But if you get a bunch of them, which is what we hope we will have from the Rubin telescope, then you can start saying, well, we got this one and that has these values. And so you can start placing estimates on the variability of the water to carbon dioxide ratios in these things and in other planetary systems.
How do you study an object like 3i Atlas that's hurtling through space at a pretty good clip? It's not like you're going to land something on it.
Yeah, so there was actually a paper written on about, we should have a way of intercepting these things because that would allow us to do a lot more detailed science. That's true, but you've got to get going fast, right? You really have to put a lot of acceleration into an object to catch it up. And so I think that's probably a little bit far-fetched, but the best way you can do the science is you can literally look at these things. And so you can do something called spectroscopy. And spectroscopy will allow you to figure out what it's made of, what the overall constituents of it are. And then on top of that, you can figure out how fast it's moving on the basis of spectroscopy as well, because you're detecting shifts in the speed of the signals that you're measuring and so on, right? You can do that with radar as well. And so, yeah, you're going to know what it is, what it's made of and so on. But getting down to the surface and then really getting a sort of like hard dig in, that would be really cool. Like sample collection would be something that we would love to do because all you really see is the stuff that's coming out, right? You can't see the stuff that's baked in, as it were. So getting a probe that could catch up and do that would be awesome, but I just don't see how we're going to do it.
At least at this point.
At least at this point. I mean, if you had probably the way you would do it is you would put a bunch of things going around in orbits ready to zip off in the right direction. That's how you'd have to do it, right? And I think that's not implausible. It would be expensive, but you compare to how much we spent on space probes in the 1970s, right? It wouldn't be a crazy thing to do.
Like Voyager.
Yeah, Pioneer, Voyager, and so on. I mean, Vikings as well. That was like everyone always talks about golden ages of things, and as soon as you do that, you sound like in my day.
Yeah, well, my rocking chair yelling at the clouds.
Yeah, but the reality is we did some pretty incredible things in the 1970s. I mean, people were joking that here is Voyager 1 still running Fortran code over 50, 60 years later. So there we go.
Have to have people that can still use it, right?
Oh, that's actually one of the really ironic things about all of the missions from the 60s and 70s, when they actually stored the tapes and then they wanted to do some data analysis and they suddenly realized they had to get all of these people out of retirement to help them decode it.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Rocky and gassy.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the way that this show comes together every day.
Oh, sounds good.
We're back after the break. All right, welcome back. Science Files is here. He's Dr. Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University, here to answer your science questions. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. I was hoping to get through the rest of 2025 without going into the deep black hole?
AI, aren't you?
Yeah. Of artificial intelligence. But it is so integrated into our lives these days. Everywhere you turn, somebody's using AI for some kind of new fangled way to do things or more efficient way to do things, or you name it. Anyway, Dr. Rob, obviously you work in the world of academia.
Yeah.
You're teaching young minds.
Funnily enough, about AI.
About AI and the ethics of it, which is kind of leads me to my next question. Obviously, AI is here. Obviously, it's not going away. Obviously, it's getting better. It seems weekly it's getting better now instead of yearly. When, as a professor, when you're asking students to submit work on a subject, their work on a subject, how do you avoid it being AI generated?
Well, the honest fact of the matter is, why we had a little bit of time where we could detect obvious, what we'll call ticks of AI-generated prose, that's gone away, right? The stuff that comes out of AIs now, you can literally tell it to write in a certain style.
Right.
Right? And so on top of that, you can tell it to make mistakes. Right. So we've reached a point where, honestly, trying to detect whether something, there are a few things, like people will probably know about the M- thing. Certain AIs really love to sort of like say something, give a clause, and then conclude. Right. And they'll put the clause in the M-dashes as well. So that is a tick. And that's quite obvious if you have a long enough essay. But at the same time, human beings do that as well. Like I have written with M-dashes in my own prose at various times or another, right? So I don't think that those things are anywhere near close to being the standard that you would want for proving that someone had actually produced something via generative AI, right? And so we've shifted, I think, to an honor system primarily, trying to include AI in sensible ways in assignments as well. Like there is the MIT study, which we talked about,
right?
That if you actually make students work on their own and then at the end give them access to an AI to look at other possibilities, then in fact your learning is stronger, right? Because you not only have built all the scaffolding yourself, then you look at other alternatives and then you can broaden out your understanding from that. So there's a fair amount of evidence that that is a really good way to work. And in general, we're seeing more and more of that being done at universities. Like I specifically in my grad class, we would look at certain scenarios and then after 20 minutes, I'd say, okay, now one person in the group can do a prompt and you can start looking at various things, right? And so all of that said and done, I would get them to show me what they did so we could talk about that and so on. So this is really changing how we think about honesty to a point where it's become an honor system, right? And so I have said, literally in some of the homeworks, look, don't use AI. If you use AI, you are defeating the point right, of doing this homework.
Somebody told me a really great analogy on this, Rob, and I wonder if it applies in your world. But you have to learn how to use the screwdriver to put the screw into the wood first before you use the drill, which makes it easier, right? You have to understand the theory of what the screw's doing and why you're doing it and why you're putting it in there.
I'm sorry, the carpenter has gone to the place of, but you're going to be splitting the wood.
But if you use too much torque, you're going to break the head of the screw off. But you know, the theory to me made sense. Like, I'm a tactile learner, so like you have to understand why you're putting the screw there first, not the easiest way to get the screw into the hole.
Oh, so this is the fundamental. But I think most students actually understand this, right? That you've got to build the scaffolding. I mean, I think a lot of people are trapped by this idea that university is a place where you go to get information and you learn information and stuff and so on. It's really not, right? If that's what you think university is, you're missing this point of growth of wisdom, right? And what we're trying to do is to create people who can think. And that is the main thing, right? It's not about, even to a certain extent, teaching skills. It's not really about that. It's helping you to think about how you're going to address things is the most valuable thing we can give you, right? And some people will say, well, I can learn that in other ways. And I would actually agree with that, right? And some people are very, very smart and very, very capable of building their own learning systems. That's totally okay. And I don't have a problem with that. The point of a university is you have a structure around it, you have assessment around it. And then at the end of it, yes, you do get this certification that you can use, right? Now, it's not so I come from the UK, right? And back when I did my degree, right, that was like, oh, you've got a degree. And like no one in my family had been to university. They were like, oh, this is going to get you a job and so on. And ironically, no, your degree never gets you a job. You're the one who goes to the interview and doesn't do the interview and so on. But it does tell people that you've been able to pass certain tests, right? And so that is valuable in and of itself. So I'm not one of those people who goes around saying, oh, you got to go to university to get a degree and then get a job. I don't believe that, right? But I do think being in an environment where you are with other people and learning together, because this is another thing we tend to forget. Learning is a social activity. Right? The best learning happens in group. Like I've done a lot of work with students in group work for this term, and feedback after feedback is how much they appreciated the group work, reinforcing what I'd been lecturing about. Now, my lectures, I try and make them a little bit interactive, so they're not just blah, 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 blah. But at the end of that hour, after I finish, they then sit down and they go through stuff that reinforces and helps them to see different perspectives, helps them to think about different ways. And one of the things that we do on top of that is to make them think about how they're thinking, right? And funnily enough, AI is quite a good tool for that, right? Because it makes you think about things that you wouldn't have thought about, right? So personally, I think the worry that we're going to have people who can't think, it's a genuine concern, and I understand where it's coming from. But I'm quite optimistic that most students understand if I go straight to this, I'm not learning anything, right? And I think that's true. There's also this anchoring effect that once you get the AI answer, it's hard for you to go away from it because you literally aren't thinking about it. You haven't created these other opportunities, right? So I always tell students absolutely straight up, I'm not going to say don't use AI. We're going to use it in controlled sense, but I need you to understand the issues and to think about the issues first. Right, and then use that to broaden out afterwards.
And there's a whole ethics angle on it as well, and you taught a whole course on that, on AI ethics. And the reason why we're having this discussion, I came across an article that's the basis. I'm paraphrasing it, of course, was that somebody had submitted work at a university. The work went through an AI detector, and the detector returned a result saying that it was AI generated work, and then that person was sanctioned because of it. Appealed it, turns out that it was that person's work, and that creates the whole ethics issue, correct?
Yeah, I mean that's a difficult situation. No system, like it's the same whether you accuse people of plagiarism or not, right? No system is absolutely perfect. With plagiarism, it's a little bit easier, I would say, though, because most of the time you can see whether something is copy and pasted.
Right.
But with AI generated stuff, I mean, by and large, we've given up on it, right? And because you just can't tell, right? So the system itself relies upon a 3 strike normally. Like the first time, you'll probably get a 0 for an assignment and so on. Second time, 0, you'll have to speak to the committee about it. And third time, that's actually really bad. You can be basically suspended, right? So most people learn the first time. And if they didn't learn the first time, then they get a fairly good talking to the second time around. But again, there are ways around this, right? And so what we're seeing more and more of is students being asked to sit oral exams, right? And those are quite intimidating for a lot of people because it's just you and the professor, right? But there is a sort of like really strong argument for that the professor knows the material and can probe what you actually know. Right. And people say, well, I get really nervous, I break down, I can't think. I do understand that. And that is a legitimate concern in some situations. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to be tested at some point with just you and either someone to talk to or a piece of paper to explain your reasoning and so on. And you should be able to do that. Right. You really should. Right. It's not. The reality is we live in a stressful world. I won't deny that at all. And it's becoming more stressful for young people. Right, because they're literally being targeted, right? There are quite literally models of people in computers that are looking at what is the most strong way of influencing someone, right? And that's a difficult technology to fight against, especially if you're young, right? So I do have some obviously huge sympathies for what many young people are going through. But at the same time, if you're going to be certified to be able to do something, you got to demonstrate you can do it.
Right. 100%. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. The Todd Veinotte Show, a 3-hour oral exam every day. We're back after the break. All right, welcome back to Science Files. Dr. Rob Thacker is here to answer your science questions, and we're going to head to the phone lines right away to see if we can get all these calls in. And we'll welcome Owen to the show. Owen, how are you?
Good morning, gentlemen. The question that I have for Dr. Rob.
Are you there, Owen?
Oh, think he cut himself off.
Hello, Owen. Are you there? I'm going to stick you on hold, Owen, to see if we can connect back up. It's unfortunate he's been on hold for a while, so maybe his phone died. 902-405.
I just had my moment.
902-405-6000 or 1-877. I think Vanessa is reconnecting us to him, so we'll
all right.
We'll do what we call this in the business is stretching, Dr. Rob.
This is a suspense.
There we go. Let's see if this one works. Owen, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I got you loud and clear. Your question for Dr. Thacker, please.
Well, I have a friend who has an autistic child. I believe he's kind of savant. But for a 7-year-old child to ask the question, how do you prove the existence of time?
Wow.
I think in this case, prove is okay. Yeah, I know where I'm going to go with this. Prove in this case is not the question to be asking, right? So what we have to remember is when we talk about the world around us, there are things that we can measure, and those things we give a concept to, right? And we'll associate, for example, length. Length is something we can measure, but how do you set the unit of measure? You have to define it. You have to say, well, this particular unit is the thing that we're going to use to measure the length of something, right? And then once you've done that, you have the concept of length. And so time is very much the same, right? If you sit in a position, you can basically have various instruments that will change over time, and the units of those changes you will then use to determine a unit of elapsed time, right? And so that's the fundamental thing. It's kind of a weird thing. I can't prove to you, for example, electrical charge exists. I know it exists, right? You can say, what is it? And I can't give you a straight answer. I can tell you all of the properties of charge, right? But if you say, what is it? I can't answer that, right? It's the thing that does this is my answer. It's kind of circular. It's axiomatic, right? And so that's the problem with how do we prove the existence of time, that's not really a reasonable question, right? And that's the fundamental difficulty of it.
He tends to believe, is it a concept?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just trying to come up with a way to try and put them on the right track.
Okay. So no, I'm trying to help. So this is actually really tricky because we'd have to sort of like sit down and he could explain what his view is and so on, and then we could talk about that. So I admit that my answer is somewhat philosophical, but I mean, the proof of the existence of time, you kind of, time is there if we measure it through a clock, right? What would be the alternative if time did not exist, right? That's another way to think about it. If time didn't exist, everything would have to happen at once. Time is the thing that stops everything from happening at once.
Owen, I hope that helps, because that's certainly one of those.
It probably doesn't, actually, because it's a really tricky question.
It is a tough question.
Right? It's really hard.
It's one of those that could be a whole semester of study there if you put that on the blackboard. What is time? Anyway, Owen, I appreciate it. I hope that helps with you. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Before we move on to our next caller, you're talking about units of measure, right? You're talking about time as a unit of measurement. When we're talking about hours of the clock, you were talking about length. Where feet is a unit of measurement, which my understanding is goes back to early days when some king's foot was X amount of inches long.
Sounds reasonable.
And that's why they called it a foot. And then they created the metric system, which was designed to confuse people who understand how feet and inches work.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about the metric system is everyone sort of goes, oh, the metric system is so well thought out because it uses units of tens, and that's about it. Everything else that it does is fairly arbitrary. It's like the unit per second is a certain number of vibrations of the cesium atom, if I remember correctly, right? And it's like, why? And it's like, it's just defined that way because that's the closest thing that we have to a single second, right? As it was previously defined. And so there's not a lot of really, how can I put it? When you really, really dig down to where measurements come from, you realize there are arbitrary things behind them. And that's the only way it can be, right? Because you have to say, okay, this is axiomatically, like this is fundamentally how we define something. It's like trying to prove 1 + 1 = 2. You can't prove that. It's an axiom that 1 + 1 is 2, right? That's part of mathematics, right? And so you have to have those axioms, and once you have those fundamental statements, then you can build things on top of that.
So I was right. I kept getting that question wrong when I was answering 1 + 1. I said it's not 2, it's 3.
You can have, well, I mean, so funnily enough,
I'm kidding, by the way.
There was literally a big debate on Twitter about this some time ago. And so this is actually quite a complex argument, but people were arguing that if you are rooted in saying 2 + 2 = 4, right, then that's a colonial viewpoint on mathematics. And a lot of people got very upset about that, right, and said, no, it's not. It's like 2 + 2 = 4. We know that. That's like fundamental. There's nothing sort of like racist about that, but that wasn't the point, right? The point was 2 + 2 = 4 is what we know to be true in our system of counting. Right, you can have a system of counting that goes up to base 2 and then 2 + 2 or up to 3, and then 2 + 2 is not going to be 4 because 4 doesn't exist in that system except represented by another different number system, right? And so it would be 1, 1 actually in a triplet system. So that freaked people out when people started posting these things of 2 + 2 = 1, 1, and they're like, no, that's all wrong. But that's dependent upon the base that you're using to express your numbers. Right. And so that was the point, that people get wedded to one particular way of thinking. Whereas, in fact, there are some societies, there's one in Central America where they count on the spaces between the fingers, not on the fingers themselves. So they use octal base 8.
II + II = IV.
Okay. I mean, that's kind of, I don't know how they did that. That's pretty incredible. But that goes back to basically the development of script and so on. So
Roman numerals, always a lot of fun. We're going to take another break here on Science Files. He's Dr. Rob Thacker here to answer your questions when we come back. All right, Science Files continues. He's Dr. Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University. We've gone from artificial intelligence to 3-eye atlases to trying to figure out what is time. It's been a wild episode.
No, I love this because this is one of the things. Sorry, I'm very animated because one of the things I fight for at universities is the idea that people like to know about the big questions.
Right.
Right? It's as much as I appreciate professional education and so on, and that's very, very valuable. Don't get me wrong, totally. you still need to be able to go somewhere and learn about the things that are so deep it makes you can't sleep at night trying to figure out what it really means.
Right, and you said earlier that, you know, the reason why we have universities is to teach people how to think, right?
Yeah.
And when somebody asks a question like one of our callers is, you know, what is time, makes you think, right?
Well, how do I prove time exists? That in and of itself is it's a really difficult question on multiple layers, right? Because it's fundamentally impossible to answer.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, Kevin.
Hi, Dan. Oh, in binary math, 1 + 1 is not 2. It's 1 + 1 is 0, carry 1.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, yeah.
But anyway, Dr. Rob, I understand positive and negative G-forces.
Mm-hmm.
I know if you're on a bus, a train, or an airplane, when it's taking off from a dead stop, that's positive G-force. And it's almost virtually impossible to get up and walk around. And negative G-force is when they slow down or brake. The same things happen.
It's all about your orientation relative to the direction of braking or accelerating.
Okay. Now, once the bus is up on the highway at highway speed, or the train is up at its rail speed,
Mm-hmm.
or is at its altitude cruise speed, you can get up and move around,
Yep.
but it's not the same as if you got out of your lazy boy and walked across your living room. Is there a sweet spot in speed where you can, say, get up, walk the length of that aircraft, train, or bus, and same as if you were walking across your living room floor?
So actually, funnily enough, I'm going to say I disagree with you, right? So the reason why walking up and down the aisle of an aircraft is different is because it's never very stable, right? You've always got a little bit of turbulence in the air. You've always got a little bit of shifting. But if you could find perfectly still air and you were flying along at a constant speed, this is one of Newton's laws of motion. That's going to feel like being in your living room and just walking around in your living room.
Okay, so there is no sweet spot where you could hit a certain speed.
No, I mean, if you're moving at a constant velocity, that is, again, under Newton's laws, indistinguishable from being at rest.
Oh, okay.
Once you start accelerating, that's another matter, of course. And again, that's one of the reasons why an aircraft does feel slightly unstable and so on, because you are always moving around just a little bit, right? But if you had perfect sort of like movement and so on, and you didn't have that, same with a train moving at constant speed, again, you don't have that. You have all the vibration coming through the floor and things like that, subtle motions and so on that you're attuned to. But again, if it was perfectly smooth, I think the example I would give you would be a spacecraft in outer space, right? That wouldn't look any different moving at a fixed speed versus just sitting there relative to something else.
Oh, excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Fighter jets, when they're making a turn or they're going to make a turn up or down, pilots will see 5, 6, and sometimes more G's, which is force of gravity, as I understand it. But then when they flip it to straight and level flight, those G's fall off, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so one of the interesting things about that is like you can survive very, very strong negative G's, right? If you're a fighter pilot and you're tuned, you're wearing a suit and so on, you can go up to like 10 G's for just a few seconds and things like that. But the positive G's, like you do an outside loop, because all of that is forcing the blood to your brain, you can't handle, I think it's more than 3 or 4.
They grunt to help prevent that. It's like they're lifting weights. They're trying to keep the blood from pooling.
Absolutely. And you've got pressure in the legs, in the suit, and so on. So all of that is about basically adjusting to it, right? And funnily enough, women are actually in a situation where they're fairly well adjusted to that physiologically, right? So there's not really any reason why women can't be as good fighter pilots as men, right? They are actually there are some arguments for why they could potentially be better, right? So that is a really interesting adaptation. But as soon as you stop the curve, as soon as you stop the acceleration, right, and you go into flat motion, then boom, it's all gone away, right? Because then if you're just moving at constant motion, this is Newton's first law, you'll just carry on and it's indistinguishable from being at rest.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, David.
Good morning, Dr. Dan and Dr. Ross.
I'm far from a doctor.
You should go back to school then.
Hey, I was just wondering, with all the satellites that we have upstairs, why don't all these people that are into AI follow the stars?
I don't understand the question.
Say that
David.
again. Sorry, David?
Follow the stars instead of with the computer system.
Oh, were you saying that we could do some kind of astrology based on all the satellites?
Yeah, geometric and all that, and because there's only 3 stars that I know is the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper, and Orion Belt.
Well, that's good enough, because if you know those, you're good in the winter, right? You're going to know where your pole star is. Yep, exactly. You're going to know roughly where south is as well. So, or southeast.
As long as the sky doesn't get too cluttered, right? We talked about that last week.
No. So funnily enough, I was talking about this on the CTV interview that, and we talked about this too. But the number of satellites. I mean, the paper took things a really long way. The paper said, look, what happens if it goes up to 500,000? I don't think we'll hit 500,000, but we might hit 100,000, right? 200,000. And then it really starts to become significant, right, in terms of like the collision avoidance possibilities. There's people writing papers about what happens if we have a collision and so on. In fact, one of my colleagues at UBC, University of Regina, published something recently, which I need to take a look at on this. So I think we're reaching the point where, seriously, we've got to start thinking more carefully about how we allocate orbital resources to make it sustainable, because once it goes wrong at certain heights, it's impossible to clean up.
We, if we get up to 200,000 satellites, right, would that, I mean, obviously the sky's a big place, but if we're using celestial navigation, would that impair it at all? Because there'd be so much stuff moving up there that it would it at least confuse you? I mean, the constellations are the constellations, right? They're not going to change.
So, I mean, you're going to... It's a little bit like... I mean, there's this fantastic demonstration that you can do for people about how the brain is good at filtering out a signal within noise. And so if you take literally a scribble, right, on a clear sheet of acetate or whatever... Oh, acetate, no one says that anymore, right? But on a clear sheet of plastic, and you put it over something, right, and you leave it static, you can't see what's underneath. It's like all covered up. You won't be able to make it out. But as soon as you move the top thing, you can see what's underneath, because that's the thing that's still, and your eye will pick that in an instant, right? And it's the same looking at the sky, right? Your eyes will see the stars that are fixed versus all of the stuff that's moving around, right? You'll be able to do that.
Just remember that they move, right?
Well, they do. They move on the speed of the Earth's rotation, obviously, right? And that's the key thing. And over the period of the year, they change as well, because we're seeing different parts of the sky at different parts of the year.
So traveling by the North Star only works when you look at it every 3 minutes. You have to reorientate yourself because
I mean, the North Star, fortunately, is one of those things that you can see all year round if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, right? And if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, it's a bit trickier. There's no really nice South Star, as it were.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Satellites and space orbit. You talked about this yesterday on CTV, that some of the new telescopes that are being put up there and are taking pictures are going to have noise in them because of these trails of these moving objects.
Yeah, no, this is a real issue, and it's not clear how we solve this with the launch parameters that we have, right? It's more expensive to put something higher up because you need a bigger rocket. That's all there is to it.
Or gas.
Yeah, and so we're looking, we have been looking at putting space telescopes fairly low for a long time. Like Hubble isn't very high up. It's about 400 kilometers, if I remember. And so that's one of the reasons why Hubble, if it keeps going, I mean, it'll probably come down in a few years anyway, and we'll probably deorbit it. But it's fairly low, so there would be, in this scenario, 500,000, lots and lots of satellites above it. And so it was crazy that we would have like 40% of Hubble images impacted by satellite trails, right? And Hubble has a very small field of view. It doesn't see much of the sky, which to me, it was incredible. For the things that see lots of the sky, and those are typically what we call survey telescopes. And so that's good for doing like measurements of the cosmic microwave background. We did that by looking at the whole sky, right? Although we do it on small patches, but the best constraints come from the whole sky. And so those type of telescopes, they can't not see these things, right? And so the only solution in that case is literally to take them so high up, they're basically in an area where no one else is going to be, and we've reserved that for basically scientific uses. And that's what they say in the paper that this was published on December 3rd. They said, look, I mean, we're literally facing a future where we're going to have to preserve some orbital areas for science so it doesn't get interfered with.
And the higher you go, the more expensive. And then when it comes to research, that's always comes down to money, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, that's one of the things we've been able to do. I mean, one of the incredible things with current launch technologies is it's bringing the price of the launch to orbit down and down and down, right? And so now when you take away the launch costs, which could be several $100 million in years gone by, and it's now down to like a few tens of millions, right? Which is still big money, obviously. But then you have the opportunity to put that money into the development itself. Right. And so that's one of the things that people have actively been working on, or just making things cheaper. Right. So that's going to be a problem in the future for sure, unless we have some way of protecting the science.
And that's it for science for this week. Dr. Rob will be back next week, and we'll be here to answer your science-related questions. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
Always a lot of fun. Thanks a lot.
And Dr. Rob is here every Tuesday here on the Todd Veinotte Show for Science Files. Thanks to all of our guests who joined the conversation today and imparted their knowledge upon us. Thank you to all of you who dialed the numbers and joined the conversation. I learn something every single day on this show. Tomorrow, Dr. John is in the house. If you have a medical question, make sure you get them in early. Until then, everybody, be well and be kind to one another.